Every single year, there's new NBA players that show potential from a young age. Players that make everyone believe they're gonna have a great career. And some go on to do just that. Some players live up to the hype and become stars, while there's others that show that potential early on and then just never get any better, which is what gives us 11 players that peaked early and fell off. And I'll start with a current day player in D'Angelo Russell. You see, D'Angelo was rightfully the second overall pick to the Los Angeles Lakers. He was without a doubt the second best player going into that draft, and in his first 2 years, he was really nothing impressive. He was never expected to be a star right away though, so it was okay. But then he gets traded to the Brooklyn Nets, and at only 22 years old, has a breakout season averaging 21, 7, and 4. And it wouldn't have been as impressive if he didn't lead the bad Nets team to a winning record and the playoffs. The same Nets that were freshly recovering from the Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett trade. But he did just that, and then that was his best season at only 22 years old. After that, everyone believed he was on the come up and would be one of the better point guards in the league in a few years, but it just never happened. Sure, he was traded around to a few teams after that, but he's now in his third year on the Timberwolves, and his game still hasn't improved at all. And looking at this roster, he should without a doubt be playing the best of his career. But he did land a max contract at one point, and he got the recognition, and some guys just stop working hard after that. Some guys get to a certain point, and they're happy with where they're at. I'm not saying that did or didn't happen with D'Angelo. All I'm saying is that if that was the case, it would make a lot of sense. Another former Nets point guard who faced a similar issue was Deron Williams, but his situation was a lot more complex. He was the third overall pick in 2005 by the Utah Jazz, and he quickly made a name for himself, developing into arguably the best point guard in the league his 5 years there. And in year 5 for him, he had become an all-star and was averaging right around 20 and 10 a game at only 25 years old. And while Deron would go on to have a few good years in Brooklyn, everyone would agree that they were nothing compared to his Utah days. He was an elite player during his run with his first NBA team, and it was definitely the peak of his career, even though he got to Brooklyn right when he should have really been developing into his prime. But it didn't turn out like that. Instead, he struggled for years as the only star on the team. They slightly improved once Joe Johnson and Brook Lopez made names for themselves there, and then the team fell short when Paul Pierce and KG joined the team. But in reality, within all that time, Deron was falling off. Every year he was playing worse and worse, and it was for a few reasons. The Nets had a new head coach and a new system almost every year. There were new players and new stars coming in and out, and he constantly was picking up nagging ankle injuries, which all combined caused him to lose confidence in himself and his game. So while physically he should have been in his prime, mentally all of this caused him to peak very early in his career until it got so bad that he eventually just decided to retire. Now, I didn't really want to include any players that fell off because of injuries, but I thought that D-Rose at least deserved a mention because, well, like I mentioned earlier, that age of 22 that D'Angelo Russell peaked at when he became a first-time All-Star, well, that was the same age Derrick became MVP of the entire league. But just to put it even more into perspective on how young that is, that's like if Luka Doncic or Ja Morant would have won the MVP last year. And D-Rose won the award over prime LeBron James. He was a guy that definitely had an entire career of greatness ahead of him had his injuries not started. And everyone collectively agreed at the time that he was on pace to have one of the greatest careers of all time. And it's crazy because it wasn't even like it was one injury that really took him out. It was just one after another constantly until he considered retirement. So you could even say that the injuries didn't completely slow Rose down, but it was more so the mental aspect and the fact that he didn't want to play like his MVP form because he knew his body couldn't keep up anymore. And unfortunately, this is one of the saddest instances of this happening. It had nothing to do with the amount of work that Rose was or wasn't putting in. Kevin Love looked like he was approaching superstar status with the numbers he was putting up and some of the big games and moments he was having against some of the elite players in the NBA. Sure, the Timberwolves never made the playoffs while they were led by him, but with those rosters they put together, I don't think most players could have. But still, for Kevin to be a multiple-time All-Star on the Timberwolves and average 26 and 13 made him arguably the best power forward in the league for a little bit there. This was all when there wasn't a ton of stretch fours in the league. Not only was Kevin scoring at a significant level from the perimeter, but he was rebounding at a high level too, which has rarely been done by many players ever since. And it was just weird. He averaged the 26 and 13, then joined the Cavs the next year, putting up only 16 and 9 in his first 2 seasons. But then the even worse part was that he stayed at pretty much that same pace ever since. Well, until he started coming off the bench last year. He was never able to bring his Timberwolves form to the Cavaliers, and it just boils down to the fact that he was treated like a star in Minnesota. And once he left, he was never put back into that same role on any team, and probably shouldn't have been because he never really should have been a #1 option. He's just not that kind of player. Dwight Howard's situation was a little different though, because on his first team, the Orlando Magic, he too was playing in the front court, but the difference was that he led his team to wins every single year and showed up on both ends of the floor night after night. And as a matter of fact, Dwight has a one-of-a-kind career. I don't know that we've seen a player be a Hall of Famer on one team, then just fall off the rest of his career while still being in his prime. In Orlando though, there's no doubt that he was a Hall of Famer. He was a top 3 to 5 player player in the league in his prime, which was from about age 22 to 27. This was when he peaked, winning 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards, making it to the NBA Finals, and unanimously being the best big man in the NBA by far. And as we all know, he left the team, had back surgery, and was just never the same, with people already saying he had fallen off in his very first season that he was on the Lakers. And they wouldn't have been wrong. Of course, Dwight's situation involves an injury, but just like Rose's, it wasn't the only factor that contributed to him falling off, because the game changed and he never added a jump shot and really just became more of a second, third, fourth, and fifth option as the years went on. And there's a lot of proof in this by the fact that his game still hasn't really changed, and he's out of the NBA completely because of it, when I still think he has a lot left to offer. But speaking of change, Serge Ibaka was one of the few that were able to make that transition. There weren't many guys to do it right, but he was one of the few players that noticed things were changing and went from a shot blocking, mid-range shooting power forward to a stretch forward that could shoot threes at ease. But let's back up. I think we'd all agree that the best basketball of Serge Ibaka's career was for the Oklahoma City Thunder. He was an integral piece to their system and success, and if he had not been there on the defensive end to counteract, having 3 of the best offensive players on the planet, there's a good chance that the Thunder don't have as much success as they did, and maybe you don't even make that one finals, because that was the same year that he averaged 3.7 blocks a game. But from that point on, after that season, every year his scoring went up, his blocks per game went down, and his mid-range and 3-point shooting slowly increased. And he transitioned into more of a perimeter player. And even though he adopted his game to the league's new style, he never ended up playing any better than when he peaked on the Thunder, because after he left them, he kind of bounced around teams and never impacted one in the same way. And as of these past couple of years, he's really just fallen out of the rotation of whatever team he's been on, which has been surprising. Now, if we want to talk about players who peaked early, Tyreke Evans is the king of this one, because he peaked in his rookie season, having one of the better rookie seasons we've ever seen, then proceeding to play worse pretty much every single season afterwards. I mean, the Kings still finished with a terrible record that year, but he put up great numbers in year 1, and they were numbers that he would never really touch again. This doesn't happen that often, but I just think it had a lot to do with the fact that he was a rookie. But then in year 2 and year 3, all that kind of wears off. He played great and proved himself. The Kings saw what they needed to see, but then he was expected to figure out how to win games and play alongside other players who were getting bigger roles now. And over the years, he proved that he just couldn't do it. Sadly, he peaked at age 20, was a bench player by 27, and out of the league by 29 thanks to his off-court issues. So a huge turn of events for Tyreke Evans. I think pretty much the same exact thing happened to Michael Carter-Williams and OJ Mayo, so I'll save the breath on going through their story. The last guy I wanted to give a quick mention to, though, was Blake Griffin. Blake Griffin was one of the rare players who came into the league and was a star right away. As a rookie, he averaged 22 and 12, won Rookie of the Year, made the All-Star team, jumped the Kia, and established himself as one of the most promising players in the league. Then Chris Paul joined the team the next year, and everything took off from there. He continued to make the All-Star team for the next 4 seasons, and the Clippers had one of the best teams in the NBA. They were making solid playoff runs every year. They were thought to be championship contenders, and a big part of it was thanks to the Blake Griffin-Chris Paul duo. He was on the top of the world at the time, on and off the court, and there was a point where he looked like he was being brought out to be the next poster boy of the NBA. While on the court, he peaked in 2014 at 24 years old when he averaged 24 points a game. But then after that year, he just kind of went nowhere. His game stopped improving, and he continued to average the same 21 points per game for 4 years in a row, and was losing popularity every year. Then he never became an all-star again besides that year in Detroit, but even then, right after that year, he went right back to falling off, and now has been just a bench player for a couple years. The whole career of Blake Griffin was always strange, and a lot of things still don't make too much sense. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'm out.